The alarm bells of the Galactic Academy screamed through the corridors like wounded animals. Emergency lights bathed everything in harsh red, casting long shadows that danced with each flash. Professor Zixtel pressed all four of her hands against the lecture hall door, her crystalline skin glowing with fear. Behind her, 37 students from 12 different worlds huddled together, their various forms of breathing creating a symphony of terror. "Nobody moves," she whispered, her translator struggling with a tremor in her voice. "The containment breach is in the botanical wing. Those Earth specimens, they're more dangerous than we thought." In the back row, Marcus Chun quietly unwrapped his lunch. The sandwich looked innocent enough, 2 pieces of bread with green leaves poking out the sides. But to the alien students who had just spent 3 hours learning about Earth's deadly flora, it might as well have been a bomb. Kreeth, a serpentine student from Andromeda's outer rim, was the first to notice. Her multiple eyes went wide, and she pointed with a shaking tentacle. "Professor," she hissed, "the human. He's eating something." Every head turned. 48 eyes, 6 eye stalks, and 3 sensor arrays focused on Marcus as he took another bite. Professor Zixtal's teaching crystals flickered through the spectrum, the alien equivalent of going pale. "Mr. Chun," she said slowly, "what exactly are you consuming?" Marcus looked up, a piece of lettuce hanging from his mouth. "Sandwich," he said through the food. "Turkey and Swiss. Want some?" The Valaxian student in the front row, the one built like a living boulder, actually fainted. "Put it down," Professor Zixtel screamed, all 4 arms waving frantically. "Those are Earth plants. We just spent 3 hours discussing how every green thing from your planet can kill." Marcus paused mid-chew. The lecture had been pretty intense. Earth's reputation in the galactic community wasn't great to begin with, and the botany unit had made things worse. Much worse. The slides had been terrifying. Pictures of innocent-looking plants with death tolls that made his alien classmates' skin change color. Poison ivy that could blind you with its oils. Oleander beautiful enough to decorate temples but toxic enough to kill with a single leaf. Castor beans that looked harmless but contained ricin. And that was just the beginning. His favorite had been the slide about potatoes. The professor had shown a simple potato something that looked so basic, so safe, and then explained how the green parts contained solanine, a compound that could cause paralysis and death. The class had been horrified to learn that humans not only knew about this toxin, but had figured out how to safely eat around it. "Professor," Marcus said slowly, swallowing his bite, "this is just lettuce." The word lettuce hit the classroom. Like a physical blow, 3 more students fainted. The plant-based student from the chlorophyll nebula actually started crying, a sound like wind through dying leaves. "Lettuce," Professor Zixtal repeated, her voice barely a whisper. She activated her teaching hologram with trembling hands. The 3-dimensional image of a simple lettuce head appeared, rotating slowly above her desk. The display showed its scientific classification, its chemical compounds, its... Marcus had to admit, when you listed everything that way, lettuce did sound pretty ominous. "Lactuca sativa," the professor read from her notes, her voice gaining strength as academic routine took over. "Contains lacticarium, also known as lettuce opium, historically used as a sedative and pain reliever. Can cause drowsiness, respiratory depression, and in large doses." She paused, looking at Marcus with something between awe and horror. "Death." Marcus looked down at his sandwich. "I mean, you'd have to eat like 50 heads of lettuce. Nobody does that." 50 heads? This came from Plix, the insectoid student whose species had nearly gone extinct from eating a single toxic berry. "How do you know this number? How do your people know the exact lethal dose?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus realized he was about to make things much worse. "Well," he said, trying to sound casual, "we tested it." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the emergency alarm seemed quieter. "You tested it?" Professor Zixtal's crystals were cycling through colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum. "Not on purpose," Marcus added quickly. "It's just ... Well, we eat a lot of weird stuff. Sometimes people get sick. Sometimes they die. We figured out the limits through ... experience." Jenny, the fragile-looking student from the crystal worlds, raised a delicate appendage. "Mr. Chun," she said in a voice like tiny bells, "are you saying your species conducts toxicity experiments on yourselves?" "Not experiments exactly." "Then how?" interrupted Torgen, the militant student from the warrior planet of Krex. "Do you know that cherry pits contain cyanide but the fruit is safe? How do you know that rhubarb stalks are edible but the leaves will kill you? How do you know the precise temperature needed to destroy the toxins in kidney beans?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Put like that, it did sound pretty bad. "We're really good at eating things that shouldn't be eaten," he finally said. The admission landed like a bomb. Students were backing away from him now, even though he was a good 20 feet from the nearest alien. The plant student was still crying. Someone in the middle rows was making what sounded like prayers, but Professor Zixtal was staring at him with a new expression. Her teaching crystals had stopped cycling through panic colors and settled on a deep, pulsing blue, the color her species made when they were thinking hard. "Mr. Chun," she said slowly, "this morning's lesson was about Earth botanical toxins. We covered approximately 200 species, each capable of causing death or severe injury. According to your planet's own scientific literature, these plants can be found in forests, gardens, and even," she paused, checking her notes, "grocery stores. Yeah, that's right. And yet you live among them. Your people have cities. You have a space program. You have art and music and literature." The blue of her crystals was getting deeper. How? It was Marcus's turn to pause. The question seemed simple, but something in the professor's tone told him it wasn't. "We learned," he said simply. "Learned? What? How to live with them. How to eat them safely. How to use them." He held up his sandwich. "This lettuce? It's actually really good for you if you don't eat ridiculous amounts. The compounds that make it technically toxic in massive doses also give it medicinal properties in normal doses. Same with a lot of plants." The classroom was completely silent now. Even the emergency alarms had stopped, or maybe everyone was just too focused to notice them. "Are you telling us," Professor Zixtal said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that your species has domesticated toxic plants?" Marcus thought about that. Domesticated seemed like a strong word, but ... I guess. I mean, coffee beans are mildly toxic. Chocolate can kill dogs, but we love it. Tomatoes used to be considered poisonous. The leaves and stems still are, but now we put them on everything." He took another bite of his sandwich. "Most of our food used to be poisonous until we figured out how to make it safe." "Most of your food," repeated Kreeth, her serpentine form coiled tight with stress, "used to be poisonous. Well, yeah. Wild almonds contain cyanide. Wild potatoes are full of toxic glycoalkaloids. Wild carrots can be confused with poison hemlock and kill you. Pretty much everything we eat now is the result of thousands of years of selective breeding to reduce toxins while keeping the good stuff." The silence stretched on. Students were staring at Marcus like he just told them he juggled supernovas. For fun. Finally, Torgen the warrior spoke up. His voice was rough, like gravel in a cement mixer, but it carried a note of what might have been respect. "Your species," he said slowly, "took the most dangerous plants in your ecosystem and turned them into food. And medicine, Marcus added helpfully. Willow bark for pain relief, that's where aspirin comes from. Foxglove for heart problems. Even some of the really dangerous stuff like belladonna gets used in tiny doses for medical purposes. Professor. Zixtel's crystals were now pulsing so rapidly they looked like a strobe light. Mr. Chun, I need to ask you something very important. Something in her tone made Marcus put down his sandwich. Okay. The containment breach we're dealing with, it's from the Earth Botanical Collection. Specifically, specimens of Atropa belladonna, Ricinus communis, and Nerium oleander. Marcus recognized the scientific names from the morning's lecture: deadly nightshade, castor bean, and oleander. The professor was right to be scared. Those were genuinely dangerous plants. The security team is afraid to enter the botanical wing because exposure to any of these specimens could be fatal, the professor continued. But if what you're telling us is true, do you want me to go get them? Marcus finished. I want to know if you could. Marcus considered this. Deadly nightshade was definitely not something to mess around with, but it wasn't like the plants were going to chase him around the room. Castor beans were dangerous if you ate them or processed them wrong, but just being near them wasn't going to kill you. Oleander was toxic to touch and definitely toxic to eat. But again, simple precautions would work. Probably, he said. I wouldn't eat them or anything, but just handling them safely? Yeah, I could do that. The reaction was immediate. Half the class started talking at once, a babble of different languages and sounds that the universal translators couldn't keep up with. The other half just stared at him in shock. Professor Zixtel held up all four hands for silence. Mr. Chun, she said when the noise died down, what would you need to safely retrieve those specimens? Marcus thought about it. Gloves. Maybe a mask so I don't breathe in any particles. A container to put them in. Basic common sense. Basic common sense, repeated Plix in a voice full of disbelief. Yeah, don't touch your face after handling them. Don't eat them. Don't crush them up and snort them. Pretty much the same precautions you'd take with any dangerous chemical. The insectoid students' compound eyes were whirring, and what Marcus had learned was their species' equivalent of rapid blinking. But these are not chemicals. These are plants. Living things that evolved specifically to kill anything that encounters them. Well, Marcus said, not specifically to kill us. They evolved to avoid being eaten by things on Earth. We just learned to work around their defenses. Jenny, the crystal student, chimed in with her bell-like voice. But how did your ancestors survive long enough to learn these things? It was a good question. Marcus tried to imagine what it must have been like for early humans, stumbling through a world full of things that could kill them, slowly figuring out what was safe and what wasn't. A lot of them didn't, he admitted. We have stories and songs about people who died from eating the wrong thing. But we also remember what they learned before they died. We passed that knowledge down and built on it. Your people, said Torgen slowly, used the deaths of your ancestors as a learning tool. When he put it like that, it sounded pretty grim, but also kind of badass. We turned tragedy into wisdom, Marcus said. Every death taught us something. Every mistake became knowledge that could save others. The emergency lighting flickered, reminding everyone that there was still a crisis going on. But something had changed in the room. The students weren't looking at Marcus with fear anymore. There was something else in their expression, something. That might have been awe. Professor Zixtel's crystals had settled into a steady, deep purple. Mr. Chun, she said formally, would you be willing to assist with the containment breach? Marcus looked around the room at 37 alien faces waiting for his answer. These weren't his people. These weren't even his species. But they were his classmates, and they were scared. He stood up, brushing sandwich crumbs off his shirt. "Let's go save some plants." The botanical wing of the Galactic Academy looked like a war zone. Shattered containment units littered the hallway. Their contents spilled across the floor like an alien garden gone mad. Emergency barriers blocked most of the corridor, but through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see the escaped specimens spreading their influence. The deadly nightshade had already begun claiming territory, its dark purple berries gleaming like poisonous jewels. The castor bean plant stood tall and proud, its large palmate leaves rustling in the artificial breeze. And there, near the far wall, the oleander bloomed in deceptive beauty pink and white flowers that looked like they belonged in a paradise garden, not a containment facility. "They've been loose for approximately 47 minutes, reported Captain Vexter, head of Academy Security. His species looked like a cross between a crab and a tank, all armored plates and weapon appendages. The automated system sealed the area, but we can't approach. The atmospheric processors are detecting toxic compounds at levels that would be lethal to 93% of known species." Marcus looked through the barrier at what the aliens considered a toxic nightmare. To him, it looked like someone had knocked over some plant pots. "What about the other 7%? He asked. "Silicon-based species, energy beings, and ... Captain Vexter paused, his optical sensors swiveling to focus on Marcus. "Humans." Professor Zixtal stepped forward, her crystals flickering with nervous energy. "Mr. Chun, I want to emphasize that this is entirely voluntary. The Academy takes no responsibility for—" "I got it," Marcus interrupted, pulling on the protective gloves they'd given him. "They were made for species with tentacles, so they didn't fit great, but they'd work. Just point me toward the plants." The security team had assembled quite the collection of equipment. Environmental suits that could filter out toxic particles, portable containment units with their own life support systems, remote manipulation arms for handling dangerous materials, a medical team standing by with every antidote known to galactic science. Marcus ignored most of it. He'd asked for gloves, safety glasses, and a couple of plastic containers. That was it. "This is insane," muttered Dr. Helix, the Academy's chief medical officer. She was a tall, willowy being from a high-gravity world, built like a praying mantis crossed with a skeleton. "He's going to walk in there with less protection than we'd use to handle mildly caustic cleaning supplies." "And yet," said Captain Vexter thoughtfully, "the toxicity readings show that the atmosphere in there would kill me in minutes. Him? According to his medical file, he'd need to stay in there for hours before experiencing serious effects. Through the barrier, they could see the plants continuing their slow conquest of the botanical wing. The deadly nightshade was already sending out runners, trying to establish new growth points. The castor bean was dropping seeds that would soon sprout into new toxic plants. The oleander was doing what oleanders do best, looking innocent while being absolutely deadly to almost everything that lived. "All right," Marcus said, hefting his containers. "How do we do this?" Captain Vexter activated the barrier controls with one armored appendage. The containment units are marked with galactic standard hazard symbols. Red with black spiral for the Atropa belladonna, yellow with skull marking for the Ricinus communis, and white with crossed bones for the Nerium oleander. "Got it. Deadly nightshade in the red container, castor beans in the yellow one, oleander in the white one." The barrier began to retract, and immediately the atmospheric alarm started screaming. The air that flowed out of the botanical wing made the security sensors go crazy, flashing warnings about airborne toxins and recommending immediate evacuation. Marcus took a deep breath of the deadly air and stepped through. The first thing he noticed was how normal everything seemed. The plants weren't moving with malicious intent. They weren't reaching for him with grasping vines or breathing poison gas. They were just plants, sitting there doing plant things. The second thing he noticed was that someone had clearly been studying these specimens extensively before the breach. Each plant was surrounded by detailed monitoring equipment, atmospheric samplers, and what looked like feeding tubes. The Academy had been trying to understand Earth's toxic flora at a level that went way beyond simple academic curiosity. Mr. Chun, came Professor Zixtel's voice through his comm unit. How are you feeling? Any symptoms of toxicity exposure? Marcus walked over to the deadly nightshade and knelt down beside it. The plant was beautiful. Really dark green leaves and those famous purple-black berries that had killed so many people throughout human history. Each berry contained enough solanine and scopolamine to seriously mess up most Earth animals, let alone alien species that had never evolved defenses against such compounds. I'm fine, he reported, carefully lifting the plant by its container. Though I have to say, you guys have been really thorough with these specimens. This isn't just for a botany class, is it? There was a pause before Professor Zixtel responded. Please focus on the retrieval, Mr. Chun. Marcus carefully placed the deadly nightshade in its designated container and sealed it. 1 down, 2 to go. But as he moved toward the castor bean plant, he noticed something odd. The monitoring equipment wasn't just measuring toxicity levels. It was measuring growth rates, reproductive cycles, and what looked like genetic analysis markers. Someone had been trying to figure out how Earth plants worked at a fundamental level. Professor, he said, lifting the castor bean plant with its large, distinctive leaves, why is there a weapons analysis scanner next to this castor bean? Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Chun, came Captain Vexter's voice instead. Please complete the retrieval and return to the secure area. Marcus looked more closely at the equipment surrounding the plants. The weapons scanner was definitely out of place for a botany class. So was the chemical synthesis analyzer. And that device that looked suspiciously like a tactical assessment. Computer. The oleander was the last plant to collect, and it was surrounded by the most equipment. Not just analysis devices, but what looked like extraction apparatus and refinement machinery. Someone had been trying to process oleander compounds, probably to concentrate the cardiac glycosides that made the plant so dangerous. Marcus carefully collected the oleander, but his mind was racing. The Galactic Academy was supposed to be a research institution dedicated to peaceful study and cultural exchange. The botanical wing was meant to house specimens for academic purposes. So why did all this equipment look military? Retrieval complete, he announced, sealing the final container. All 3 specimens are secure. Excellent, came Professor Zixtel's voice, sounding relieved. Please return to the security barrier immediately. As Marcus walked back through the contaminated area, he took one more look around the botanical wing. Now that he wasn't focused on the plants, he could see other details. The reinforced walls that looked more like a bunker than a laboratory. The multiple containment systems that seemed designed to hold much more dangerous specimens than a few toxic plants. The security cameras that were clearly military grade. And there, half hidden behind an overturned analysis table, a data pad with what looked like a species classification chart. At the top, in large letters, was a single word that made Marcus's blood run cold. WEAPONIZATION. He slipped the data pad into his jacket pocket, just as he reached the security barrier. Mr. Chun. Professor Zixtel rushed forward as the barrier sealed behind him. How do you feel? Any symptoms? Nausea? Dizziness? Respiratory distress? I feel fine, Marcus said, handing over the containers. Just like I figured I would. Doctor. Helix immediately started running scanners over him, checking for toxin exposure. The devices beeped and chirped, analyzing everything from his skin chemistry to his respiratory function. "Remarkable," she muttered. "Trace compounds detected, but well below toxic thresholds. His physiology is processing the exposure as if it were routine environmental contamination." "Because for humans it kind of is," Marcus said. "We evolved on a planet full of things trying to kill us. We adapted." Captain Vexter's optical sensors were focused on the recovered specimens. "These plants," he said slowly, "according to our analysis, each one contains enough toxic compounds to eliminate the population of a small orbital station." "If they ate them, sure," Marcus replied. "But you'd have to process the toxins concentrate. Them, maybe find a way to deliver them as a weapon." He trailed off, thinking about all the military equipment he'd seen in the botanical wing. Professor Zixtel and Captain Vexter exchanged a look. It was the kind of look that said they were thinking the same thing Marcus was thinking. "Mr. Chun," the professor said carefully, "what would you say if I told you that some members of the Galactic Council have expressed concerns about Earth's potential membership?" "What kind of concerns?" "The kind," said Captain Vexter, "that arise when a species demonstrates the ability to weaponize their own ecosystem." Marcus felt the datapad in his jacket pocket like it was burning. "And what if I told you that some humans might have concerns about why a research institution has weapons analysis equipment in their botany lab?" The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Students and security personnel were still gathered around, ostensibly celebrating the successful retrieval of the toxic specimens, but Marcus could feel undercurrents of something much more. Serious. Dr. Helix finished her medical scan and stepped back. "He's completely unaffected," she announced. "No toxin buildup, no respiratory distress, no cellular damage. It's as if he took a walk through a garden." "Which, from his perspective," said Professor Zixtel thoughtfully, "he essentially did." Torgan, the warrior student, pushed forward from the crowd. "Human Marcus," he said in his gravelly voice, "my people are known throughout the galaxy as fighters. We have conquered 17 worlds and defended our space against the void swarms. But what you just did," he paused, struggling with the concept. "You walked through death and came back unharmed." "I walked through plants," Marcus corrected. "Just plants." "Plants that could kill everyone in this room," added Jenny, her crystal body chiming with stress harmonics. "Plants that your people somehow learned to live with." Kreeth, the serpentine student, raised a tentacle. "Mr. Chun, I have been thinking about what you said earlier, about your ancestors learning from deaths, turning tragedy into wisdom. How many of your people died learning these lessons?" Marcus considered the question. Human history was full of accidental poisonings, deaths from eating the wrong berries, children who didn't know better than to chew on oleander leaves. Even now, with all their knowledge, people occasionally died from plant toxins. "A lot," he admitted. "But that's how we learned. Each death taught us something. Each mistake became knowledge that saved others." "And now," said Professor Zixtel, her crystals pulsing with that deep thinking color again, "you carry that knowledge. All of you do." "Pretty much. I mean, basic. Plant safety is something every human kid learns. Don't eat random berries. Don't touch plants you don't recognize. If it looks too beautiful to be real, it probably wants to kill you." The gathered aliens stared at him. To them, it probably sounded like he was describing survival training for a death world, which Marcus was beginning to realize might not be far from the truth. "There's something else," he said, making a decision. He pulled out the datapad he'd found in the botanical wing. "I found this in there." Captain Vexter took the pad and activated it. His optical sensors scanned the display, and Marcus watched his armored form go very still. What is it? Asked Professor Zixtal. A threat assessment, Captain Vexter said quietly. Detailed analysis of Earth flora for potential military applications. Toxin extraction protocols. Delivery system designs. He looked up at Marcus. Someone has been studying your planet's plants as weapons. The implications hit the crowd like a physical blow. Students backed away from Marcus, not out of fear of him personally, but out of a growing realization of what his presence might mean. Who? Marcus asked. Who ordered this analysis? The classification codes indicate high-level Galactic Council authorization, Captain Vexter replied. This isn't Academy research. This is military intelligence. Professor Zixtal's crystals were cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. Mr. Chun, she said slowly, I think we need to have a much longer conversation about Earth's application for Galactic Council membership. And I think, said Marcus, looking around at the faces of his alien classmates, we need to talk about why you're all so scared of plants. The private conference room deep in the Academy's administrative sector felt more like an interrogation chamber than a place for academic discussion. Marcus sat across from Professor Zixtal, Captain Vexter, and 3 other officials he didn't recognize, beings whose species he couldn't even identify, wrapped in formal robes that concealed more than they revealed. The datapad lay open on the table between them, its contents projected in the air above. Detailed molecular diagrams of plant toxins, extraction procedures, weaponization protocols, and at the bottom of every document, the same classification, Earth Species Threat Assessment. How long have you known? Marcus asked. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Finally, one of the robed figures spoke, a voice like wind through metal pipes. Earth first appeared on our long-range sensors approximately 300 of your years ago, the being said. The initial observations were ... concerning. Concerning how? Professor Zixtal activated another holographic display. This one showed Earth from space, but not the blue marble humans we're used to seeing in their own photographs. This image was overlaid with threat indicators, toxicity readings, and danger assessments. Your planet, she said quietly, registers as uninhabitable to 97% of known galactic species. Marcus stared at the display. The continents were covered in red zones, areas of extreme danger. The ocean showed chemical compositions that would be lethal to most alien life forms. Even the atmosphere was marked with warnings about oxygen toxicity. We breathe oxygen, he pointed out. Most life on Earth needs it. Yes, said Captain Vexter, and that was our first clue that something was very wrong with your world. Another hologram appeared, this one showing atmospheric compositions of various inhabited worlds. Earth's atmosphere stood out like a sore thumb, 21% oxygen, which according to the galactic standard was nearly at the level of a chemical weapon. High oxygen atmospheres are incredibly corrosive, explained the wind-voiced official. They cause rapid cellular breakdown in most organic species. The fact that complex life evolved in such an environment suggested that your world's organisms had developed extreme resilience to chemical damage. But that was just the beginning, added Professor Zixtal. When we sent automated probes to collect biological samples, the results were terrifying. The display changed again, showing a catalog of Earth species that read like a horror novel. Venomous snakes with neurotoxins that could paralyze in seconds. Spiders whose bites caused tissue necrosis. Plants that could blind with their sap or kill with a single leaf. Every sample we analyzed, said the professor, contained compounds that would be classified as weapons of mass destruction under galactic law. Marcus looked at the list of weapons: bee venom, poison ivy, mushroom toxins, things that humans dealt with as minor inconveniences. but you focused on the plants," he said. "Plant-based toxins are the most concerning," said the third official, whose voice sounded like grinding stone. "They can be cultivated, concentrated, and weaponized on an industrial scale. A species that could casually consume compounds like solanine, ricin, or cardiac glycosides could potentially flood the galaxy with biological weapons." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing what he was hearing. To these aliens, humanity looked like a species of walking biological weapon factories, casually snacking on things that could wipe out entire civilizations. So when Earth applied for Galactic Council membership, he said slowly, "you saw it as a potential invasion." "Not invasion," corrected Captain Vexter. "Something worse. A species so adapted to toxicity that they might not even realize they were being deadly." The room fell silent. Marcus looked around at the assembled officials, seeing his own species reflected in their fearful expressions. Humans, the accidental apocalypse. The friendly neighborhood mass extinction event. "There's more," said Professor Zixtel quietly. "Another. Display activated. This one showing human cities, human agriculture, human industry. But again, overlaid with threat assessments. Your cities," she explained, "are built around toxic manufacturing processes. Your agriculture deliberately cultivates poisonous plants and makes them safe through processing. Your medicine is based on controlled applications of lethal compounds." Marcus saw his world through alien eyes for the first time. Chemical plants that would be considered weapons factories. Hospitals that stockpiled what other species would call military-grade toxins. Farms growing plants that could kill entire alien populations. "And your people," added the stone-voiced official, "seem to consider this normal. Because for us it is," Marcus said. "We've lived with these things for so long that we forget how dangerous they are." "Exactly," said Captain Vexter. "That's what makes you so terrifying." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Terrifying. He thought about his classmates, the way they'd looked at him when he casually ate lettuce they considered toxic. The way they'd backed away when he handled plants that could kill them. "So, what happens now?" he asked as the officials exchanged glances. It was Professor Zixtel who finally answered. "The Galactic Council has been divided," she said. "One faction wants to quarantine Earth permanently, prevent human expansion into galactic space. They see your species as an existential threat to galactic civilization. And the other faction? They want to study you," said the wind-voiced official. "Learn how to replicate your resistance to toxins. Turn every species in the galaxy into ... double quotes." He paused, searching for words. "Into humans." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Both options sounded terrible. "There's a third option," said Professor Zixtel quietly. "It's why you're here at the Academy. Why we've been conducting these studies. Which is?" "Partnership," said Captain Vexter. "Your people have solved problems that have plagued the galaxy for millennia. Toxic worlds that could be colonized if we had your resistance. Medicinal compounds that could save lives if we knew how to use them safely. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions." The stone-voiced official leaned forward. "But partnership requires trust, and trust requires understanding." "Understanding? What?" "Whether your species is capable of restraint," Professor Zixtel said bluntly. "Whether you can be trusted not to accidentally or intentionally poison the galaxy." Marcus thought about that. The casual way humans handled dangerous chemicals. The way they bred toxins out of plants but kept the knowledge of how to breed them back in. The way they turned poisons into medicines and medicines into weapons depending on the dose. What would that look like? He asked. This partnership? Humans could help other species safely colonize toxic worlds, explained Captain Vexter. Worlds rich in resources but uninhabitable due to atmospheric or biological hazards. In exchange, the galaxy could offer technology, trade relationships, cultural exchange, and oversight, added the wind-voiced official, monitoring systems to ensure that human expansion doesn't accidentally create extinction events. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but Marcus could hear the underlying message. Humans would be useful, but they'd also be watched, controlled, managed like a dangerous but valuable resource. And if Earth refuses? The silence that followed was answer enough. The quarantine faction has a lot of support, Professor Zixtel sighed quietly. The botanical wing incident today will only strengthen their position. The fact that a human student could casually walk through what we considered a lethal contamination zone makes us look like monsters, Marcus finished. Or gods, said Captain Vexter. And in galactic politics, there's not much difference. Marcus stood up and walked to the room's single window. Outside, he could see the Academy's diverse student body, dozens of species from across the galaxy, all learning together in what was supposed to be a peaceful environment. His classmates were out there somewhere, probably still processing what they'd seen today. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Proof," said the stone-voiced official. "Proof that humans can be trusted with their own capabilities. Proof that your species understands the responsibility that comes with being walking biological weapons.